Hey everyone, my name is Lisa King, licensed professional counselor in the state of Texas and owner of Formosa Wellness. Today I want to talk a little bit about trauma. And trauma is a word that is used a lot these days, but oftentimes people are not really sure what it means. Usually trauma is associated with the most terrible things like war, car accidents, something that is extremely awful that happens to you physically. But trauma is actually so much more than that. So, if I were to define trauma, I would say that it is something that happens to you that is so distressing that it really challenges you to feel like it challenges your sense of self, and it challenges whether or not you feel safe, right? So really those two things can happen. So like, let's give an example. In a case of a car accident, maybe it's a severe car accident, and you see horrific things, and maybe someone passes away or someone is really hurt. It could even be you. You often continually replay those events in your head over and over again. It makes you not feel safe to want to get in a car again. You don't feel safe being in traffic, especially when there's a lot of cars on the road. You may not trust not being in the driver's seat. You may, you may not be sure to know who you can trust anymore, right? Including yourself. You just don't feel safe. But it also begins to kind of erode yourself in the sense that as you replay these things, as you're re-experiencing this experience through thoughts, and then your body, feeling stress, it makes us, doubt our own experience, our own lived experience. And so oftentimes people in the past, and even still today, refer to big T, little t. When they're talking about trauma. Big T would be those really obvious things. And then little t would maybe be things that aren't quite as obvious. They could be verbal abuse that you experienced as you were growing up or in a relationship. They could be emotional manipulation. It could be toxic behaviors that over time erode your sense of self-esteem and things like that. But the real, at the core of trauma is this idea that if you experience trauma outside of just one event, because really I want to talk more about complex trauma, which is that we experience more than one thing that's deeply distressing in our lives, that compromises whether or not we feel safe in the world, and it compromises our sense of self. That's what I want to really focus on. So if we constantly experience, I'm going to give you kind of an example. Like for me, growing up as a missionary kid, I started off as a pastor's kid, and then, eventually my family moved overseas when I was in 5th grade. So then my parents became missionaries. But in this space that I grew up, it was very, I grew up Southern Baptist, and, obviously very focused on heaven, hell, this black and white, situation. And whether intentionally or not, we're not, I think it's important to stress that when we go back and look at what happened to us and try to understand, like, why are we struggling with complex trauma? It's important that we're not looking back at our life to place blame, but more to understand why we are where we are today. Okay. I know for me in my healing work, I've gone back, looked at my family. I understand why they did a lot of what they did. A lot of it comes from their own childhoods, right? And we pass those things on generationally. But I think it's important that we do get that understanding. And so for me, growing up pastor's kid, missionary kid, in this world that was very, this is what happens if you're not a Christian. If you're not a Christian and you don't ask Jesus into your heart, then you will go to hell. And have not accepted him as your savior, then you'll go to hell. And I know for me, fear was really a cornerstone of my life growing up, a huge amount of fear. And I can remember laying in bed at night and just reciting over and over the same prayer of asking Jesus into my heart and asking him to forgive me of all my sins, even the ones I couldn't remember, so that I would, feel content and secure knowing that I was going to be going to heaven. But here's the problem. What we focus on and what becomes the thoughts that churn over and over in our mind becomes our reality, whether or not it's real, true, all those things, it's real for us. Okay. And so for me, my life, for a good part of my life, was led through fear. And if your life is led through fear, it distances you from who you are. And now, instead of living this true self, you begin to live a false self and become what you think everybody else wants you to be, or who you think God wants you to be. I mean, it's always questioning, not sure, not certain, doubting. That was my reality. That's what happened to me. And it eroded my sense of self. And I really was, I was good at performing. I was good at, I remember from a time I was little, I loved to sing. But I realized that, like, if I was on stage and I was performing, I would get accolades and validated. And so I became this, always looking for ways to perform and put myself out there and things like that. But that really was not truly who I was. I was doing this, for other people and to get that validation and to feel like I was seen from other people. And really at the bottom of all that was just a fear of, like, I'm not good enough. Something's wrong with me. I need to make sure that everything I'm doing is to put myself in the right place so that I will go to heaven and everything's going to be good. Right. So your whole, outlook is focused on this afterlife. And the problem with that is you miss the whole point that we're living life today. Right? Like, it's fine if you want to think about an afterlife, but then you miss out on being present today. And I did that for a good many years of my life. So, how do we heal, when we've had these things, when we've had complex trauma? The scariest part is because a lot of people have lost their sense of self and they don't feel safe. Even thinking about going to therapy is terrifying, because I'm supposed to go to therapy and talk to this random person that I've never met. I don't know who they are, and tell them all the things that have happened to me. I mean, like, that's just crazy. And, then you think, like, if you've grown up with this kind of, especially in religious trauma, right, where there was a lot of influence on your belief system and things like that, the scary part can be, well, if I go to therapy, then they're going to try to influence me in a different way, and then I'm still not going to own, who I am and who I want to be. So there's a lot of scary things there. But I want to assure you that therapists that specialize in trauma, especially complex trauma, and specialize in helping people that have gone through religious trauma, should never tell you how to live your life. They should be able to hold space for you. And they should also have a lot of knowledge in techniques and therapies on how you kind of dig out from complex trauma. I think first and foremost, you don't just dig into a story with someone, right? It takes time in any relationship, and including a therapeutic relationship, to build a relationship with someone. And so first and foremost is, first of all, building a rapport, getting to know each other, feeling safe is really where things should start, creating a safe space for someone. And you really can't have effective therapy, and this is how I feel, until someone feels safe enough to sit in that space. And sometimes that takes a little bit. When people have had complex trauma, they're often emotionally dysregulated, which means they don't feel safe in their body. And so they may look to outside people that don't understand trauma, like something's going on with them. Are they manic? Are they this? Are they that? Because their emotions kind of jump and are all over the place. But that's an indication that their body has just had so much happen to it that it struggles to be calm, right? It's not in the part of our nervous system that is at peace and feels calm. It's actually in the fight flight. And so we want to be able to focus on how we create safety and create a plan for that before we start digging in to anything more complex. So that's where I'm going to stop for today. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight as to what trauma is, right? It's a distressing event, or in the case of complex trauma, it's events, right? So trauma, like something like post-traumatic stress, would be one event happens and then people can develop PTSD. But when you're talking about complex post-traumatic stress or CPTSD, this is event after event after event. Someone has experienced things oftentimes throughout their lifetime. And it gets more complicated as they get older, because then it begins to build on, they are, kind of drawn to people that are not safe because they don't know how to find people that are, right? And so that's part of healing, is learning how to find those people that can be our community, that understand us, that can hold space for us, that are safe. It's learning how to do that. So that's the end of the lesson today. What trauma is: a distressing event that leaves us not feeling safe and that leaves us questioning who we are. And then we have PTSD, which is one event, and then we have CPTSD, which is multiple events that erode away our sense of safety and our sense of self. I will be back again soon to make another video to talk more about healing from trauma.